Okay, let's jump right into this. I'm sure you've seen this happen recently. A company drops a fortune on some shiny, expensive new AI implementation, and it just completely flops. Or a massive strategic initiative falls totally flat. Or maybe they roll out a strict accountability system, and it immediately turns into endless internal arguments. And what do we always do? Well, we love to blame the tools. We say, the AI is hallucinating, or the strategy was poorly timed, or the framework itself is just broken. But what if the tools aren't broken at all? What if the really uncomfortable reality is that the company's starting data is just too foggy for any of these sophisticated tools to actually attach to?
This cuts straight through all that noise. As this quote from our source material points out, the real problem is the lack of clear starting data. It is so incredibly easy for a business to just point fingers at their software vendors or their complex management frameworks when things go wrong. But the deeper structural issue is actually really simple. You literally cannot automate, you cannot measure, and you cannot improve a truth that you never bothered to capture in the first place. You simply can't put a state-of-the-art roof on a foundation made of pure fawn.
So here is the crucial takeaway. High-level business systems, whether we're talking about a complex predictive AI model or a strict accountability system like a negative price guarantee where a company actually pays you back if they fail, these systems do not run on optimism. They require a measurable reality. True accountability requires defined outcomes, it requires defined proof, and it requires defined penalties. And absolutely none of that can exist without clean numbers serving as the bedrock. Because if that bedrock isn't solid, literally everything you build on top of it is completely compromised.
To really see this in action, let's walk through what happens when that foundation is missing. It triggers this entire failure cascade, corrupting every single system built on top of it. Think about it. If you feed dirty data into AI, the AI doesn't magically clean it up for you. No, it just produces confident nonsense. It makes your bad assumptions look polished and highly authoritative. If you try to build a strategy on missing data, you don't get an actionable plan, you get a fantasy plan. If you talk a big game about corporate ethics, but you have no measurable baseline, that's just performance theater. You can't claim you're responsible while simultaneously hiding the numbers that would prove it. And if you try to implement strict accountability, like a -1 guarantee, without undeniable proof, that doesn't lead to higher standards. It just leads to total chaos. A penalty without proof doesn't enforce anything. It just creates a war room of finger-pointing. Sophisticated tools don't clear the fog, they amplify it.
But here is the really dangerous part about all of this. When the truth isn't visible internally, the system doesn't just quietly hit pause. The cost of that invisible truth doesn't just vanish into thin air. Instead, the system exports that cost. Who pays for it? Well, your customers pay with disappointment because promises aren't met. Your internal teams pay with burnout because they are constantly fighting fires caused by completely conflicting information. And the wider market? They pay with lower standards overall. Data clarity isn't just about having good analytics hygiene. It is fundamentally an accountability issue. Someone always ends up paying when a company cannot see or prove what actually happened. Now, in a previous explainer, we actually looked at how the external market is changing, specifically how buyers today have access to near-perfect transparency. They can investigate, they can compare, and they can question claims more effectively than ever before in history. But look at this dangerous asymmetry we're dealing with now. You have an external market that is becoming crystal clear for buyers, while the company itself remains internally foggy. Think about how wild that is for a second. A buyer has more clarity looking in from the outside than the seller has looking at their own internal operations. The buyer sees exactly what's happening, but the seller cannot even trust its own internal starting data. Which brings us to the necessary fix. And spoiler alert, it is not a software patch you can just buy off the shelf. The real upgrade here is mental. Leadership must absolutely worship clarity, not comfort. This requires a massive mindset shift for founders and executive teams. Clean data is not administrative IT work that you just push down the org chart. Transparency is not just some extra credit for a good quarter. Measurement is not micromanagement. And missing numbers are not just business as usual. Clean data has to be recognized as the absolute, non-negotiable foundation of strategic reasoning and trust. So we have to ask a foundational question. And I want to be really clear here. We aren't just talking about which pipeline numbers to track or what metrics to slap on a PowerPoint slide. We're asking a much deeper structural question. Is your starting reality actually trustworthy enough for measurement to mean anything at all? Because if the underlying data is missing, if it's messy, contradictory, or politically protected by different departments, then any definition of success or failure becomes totally unstable. Sure, you might have numbers on a dashboard, but do you have a shared reality that everyone can actually agree on? The answer to that question requires building a completely new foundation. We call this the truth layer. It is a foundational data clarity gate. It's the absolute prerequisite that must be established before you define outcomes, before you look for proof, and way before you try to attach any penalties or accountability systems. Basically, truth must precede tooling. Because, you cannot build a fair consequence on facts that nobody trusts in the first place. Let's look at how this continuous causal chain actually builds up, because you really cannot skip a single step here. It all starts with clean starting data, which flows directly into a defined outcome. You see, you can only define a real, agreed-upon outcome. You can only know what success actually means if you have a clean starting reality that everyone trusts. If your baseline is ambiguous, your definition of success becomes completely arbitrary. You end up with departments arguing over what done or successful even means, just because they don't agree on where they started. And naturally, that flows right into the next critical link. Once you have a clearly defined outcome, well, now you can determine exactly what evidence counts as credible proof. Proof cannot be trusted if the data producing it is a mess. But when you have a clear outcome, your proof becomes testable and undeniable. You finally move away from vague statements like, well, I think we did a pretty good job, to here is the undeniable, testable evidence that the agreed-upon outcome was achieved. And because you now have that undeniable proof, you can accurately judge what missing value looks like. Think about it. Without a trustworthy baseline and undeniable proof, missing value just becomes an argument. It turns into a highly subjective political dispute between departments who are just trying to protect their budgets or avoid getting the blame. But with defined proof, a failure is stripped of all that emotion. It's just a measurable gap in value. It becomes an operational fact rather than a personal failure. Which brings us to the actual consequence. Only after that missing value is clearly defined can a penalty be enforced fairly. And remember, a penalty doesn't become fair just because it's strict or severe. A penalty absolutely fails if it feels like a random punishment. It only becomes fair because it is securely attached to a shared, proven reality. So here is the complete, continuous model of the truth layer in action. Clean starting data allows for a defined outcome. That creates defined proof, which then highlights defined missing value, which finally allows for a defined penalty. And once this entire truth layer is built, what happens? Measurement finally describes actual performance instead of just decorating a dashboard to make people feel productive. An improvement? It becomes real, measurable, and continuous, instead of just being theatrical busy work. You create a self-correcting loop that is grounded entirely in reality. Now, let's contrast this with how a lot of companies operate today. You absolutely cannot try to fix bad premises with AI. AI, as a business layer, will not automatically clean the premise it is given. If you feed it a foggy reality, it just processes that fog faster. It literally gives you wrong answers at the speed of light. The intervention must happen at the starting reality. You have to establish that truth layer first, before any of that sophisticated tooling is ever applied. Which brings us to the ultimate symbol of this accountability, the -1 guarantee. This tag represents strict accountability attached to truth. It's the radical idea that a company's price goes negative. They actually pay a penalty on themselves if value is missing. But let's look at this concept carefully. It is a consequence. It is a price tag. And it cannot function, it cannot mean anything, if the underlying data is a mess. A penalty without truth is just conflict waiting to happen. But a penalty attached to defined proof, that becomes true, undeniable accountability. Listen to this realization from the source material, because it really brings it all home. The true power of any AI integration, or any strict accountability shift, isn't the consequence itself. It's not about the punishment, and it's certainly not about the fancy tech. The real power is the absolute clarity that makes those systems possible in the first place. When you commit to clean starting numbers, analysis becomes real. AI becomes genuinely useful instead of just confident nonsense, and accountability becomes undeniably fair. So I want to leave you with this final provocative thought. Your AI, your strategy, and your accountability systems cannot possibly deserve more trust than the truth layer beneath them. Stop buying new tools to manage your fog. Stop trying to automate a truth you haven't even captured yet. Ultimately, the guarantee isn't the penalty. The guarantee is clarity. Do the hard work, build the truth layer first.